So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce someone who's been a pillar of NIDC since it started, and I'm really delighted to be able to introduce her on the stage here today, Joan Breen.
Cheers, Kieran. I'll give you that tenner afterwards. Thanks everyone for coming today. This room's a lot bigger than I thought, but thank you everyone for coming today and for coming and paying attention to my talk. I'm hoping that if anybody went to Phil's talk earlier, the Snakes and Ladders one, this one would be a nice complement to that talk because it is a little bit of overlap, but it's more of a practical implementation of what Phil talked about. For anyone who doesn't know, I've been in industry now 17 years, 4 years in management. I'm currently a senior software engineer at DailyPay. I have a degree and a master's in informatics and computer science, but informatics is just a fancy term for computer science. And I'm also a wife and mother to 3 children. Claire's 7 and the twins are 4 years old, and they're down in the childcare, which I have to say is brilliant, and I appreciate that NIDC22 do it every year. And they also were up checking out the Raspberry Jam session as well, which was great, and they loved it. So your performance cycle then. So this is a 4-year-old's take on what the performance cycle should be. So this is really for the Gen Zers or whatever generation is coming after Gen Zers, because I was doing my slides one night and my 4-year-old son got at the laptop and this was his interpretation. And I've showed this slide to a few people, and people have taken quite a lot from this. You can sort of see you start out at the start of your performance year, you set your goals, you don't really want to, you're crying, then you actually get into the year, things are going well, then production breaks in the second line, it all goes wrong, and then you can kind of make your own story up from the rest of the year going forward after that. But the moral of the story is by the end of the year, everyone's all good again and you're happy and you get your pay rise. So that is, in years to come, you're going to see slides just full of emojis at this talk, I'm convinced. So my main motivation for kind of why I wanted to do this talk was because now that I've kind of been in management now 4 years, I am still kind of hearing a lot of frustration from engineers, from both friends and people that I manage. And then also I'm kind of twigging myself of, that's why I didn't get promoted. It makes sense now, that feedback that I got, or why I didn't get it at that time. So this is kind of like what I kind of want to kind of share a little bit for folks as well, so that you can maybe kind of take it away and make your life easier as well. And I love this quote from Sarah Bakley. She's like a personal hero of mine. She's the owner of Spanx. And I did her master course or masterclass course recently. And she has this wonderful quote in it. And it stems from whenever she first got her first contract in the big department store in America, they just told her to send the product to them and they would put it out in the shelves or whatever. And she said no, she wanted to go and do it herself. And she went and she trained the staff and she stood on the floor every day and sold it. And basically one day a couple asked her, you're the owner of the company, have you nothing better to do than to be here selling your product? And she doubted herself, but she realized then afterwards it absolutely was the right place for her to be, because if she had just sent her product and they dealt with it and she put the success of it in their hands, it would have been a failure. It would have been put on a shelf, people wouldn't have noticed it, and it would have died a death. So the moral of that story is you want to control your success as much as you can and put as much as you can control in your hands as possible. And you might think, well, sure, that's my manager's problem. It's kind of a little bit of both. And if you help your manager, it be a lot easier. So this is the caveats and kind of disclaimer kind of section. This is a very general process. I know there's people I manage in the front row here ready to heckle me, but it is not, it's a very generalized process for a lot of kind of bigger kind of mid to large scale kind of companies. You'll typically find a sort of similar process. Folks, I haven't designed any of these processes. I have no say in how performance and the companies and the general sort of rule of thumb of how it's done in the industry. I just implement it basically. And take everything I say with a pinch of salt. It's like that song, Everybody Wears Sunscreen. It's like, advice is a form of nostalgia. So take it with a pinch of salt as well. And then for the purpose of this presentation, I have made quite a number of assumptions. One, that you're not in a startup, or your company at least has a performance review process and a promotion cycle. that you have a manager, because there's a lot of people who don't have managers, particularly in startups, that you have weekly one-to-ones with your manager. And if you don't have weekly ones with your manager, I thoroughly recommend that you get your manager to read The Effective Manager by Mark Horstman. And if your manager doesn't set up one-to-ones with you, you set up the one-to-one with your manager and make it happen. And if they can't do it weekly, do it bi-weekly. If they can't do it bi-weekly, then do it every other week. But make sure you have that one-to-one time with your manager and you drive those sessions. Because that's how you're going to build up that good relationship with your manager. If you don't have a good relationship with your manager and your workplace is toxic, this process is a lot harder. And also, I've made assumptions everybody's software engineers, and that your company does, and particularly your management team, will be agile, servient leadership. This process will not work if it's the old style dictatorial management where everything's just top down. The general performance cycle then. A lot of people don't actually know their performance cycle and how it works in their companies. It's usually a year-long process. Sometimes you'll be mid-year, quarterly promotions or off-cycle promotions. You do your goal setting usually at the start of the year. A lot of people ignore it and don't do it and carry on. You should have your weekly one-to-ones, and you will usually do an official mid-year check-in. It's usually stipulated by your people ops or your HR people. And then this is a bit that most people actually don't realize, is that your year-end process takes about 2 months. There's actually quite a lot of steps goes into that people don't realize. And that's kind of what I wanted to kind of emphasize a bit today, because what you'll actually find is, so usually the process will kick off and you'll do your self-reflection and write up how you felt you've done this year. You'll have that conversation with your manager. They'll give you their 2 cents. They'll take all that note and they'll go off to do calibration sessions or present at a promotion panel or a performance panel. There's usually a communication between other management to kind of come to your rating. And then once that rating is set, that then has to get all checked by HR to make sure that you're being fair, that you're not just giving your buddies your top grades, that you're not just focusing purely on all your white males in your team and ignoring everybody else. So there's a lot of kind of checks kind of have to go into that to kind of make sure that the grades are what they are. And also there be a bit of distilling down of, well, is a person really worth that grade, or, are they really a high performer? And then once that sort of all those grades and stuff are done, by then they've usually worked out what budget there is for pay increases, for what pot there is for bonus, and what pot there is for kind of promotions as well, for the pay increases that go along with those. And whenever then that gets distilled down to usually whatever manager or whoever makes that decision about how much money you get, they will take whatever value you got in your rating, and then they have to kind of work it out. And there usually is a bit of kind of number crunching and kind of stuff that has to happen to make sure that you can get it. I did miss a point there actually. Whenever they're working out the budget, the company has to work out, can it scale? Can it afford to pay the amount of people what they're projecting to pay? And if they hire more people, all those budgets and stuff all gets number crunched out to make sure that they can actually still pay people in 6 months' time. And so then by the time all of those values of how much you're going to get your pay and stuff is set, that then all has to go back to HR again, and back to HR finance for approval. They have to get checked again, make sure that you're being fair, that you're doing fair market value and that you're also being fair against your teammates, that you're not just giving your money again to all your white male developers, and that it's all kind of as fair as it can be. And by the time your manager actually gets the green light to go and tell you that, you've probably gone through 2 months of a process there, roughly. So the point is, if you're only telling your manager that you wanted a promotion at that time in that conversation, it's too late. To be honest, it's too late then. You really need to be having the conversation much sooner. So I want to kind of touch a little bit on the ratings. So ratings they usually have these arbitrary titles of like good, meeting expectations, surpassing expectations. Basically, it's usually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it'll depend on your company whether one's the best or one's worst. And what you typically will find is most people will fall into the number 3, whatever that is. And I've had in the past where a lot of people will get really upset because they've only just met expectations because that's the title I was given. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. It's good. Because what you'll actually find is, and the reason why I've got the Avengers slide on here, so anyone who's ever been to my talks before, they'll always know there's always a superhero reference in there. The Avengers is a really high-performing team. They save the world. Now, how do you differentiate who on that team is outstanding, who's very good, who's met expectations, and who's underperforming? So you have to go through each one of those people. So how do you decide if Captain America was outstanding or was it Iron Man? And then that's how, these are the kind of conversations that you kind of have to have about people. So if you've got a really high performing team, the bar is set really high. So if you get a 3 on a really high performing team, that's still really good. So it's just something to kind of bear in mind. And a lot of people get annoyed about it, but it's not necessarily always the way it should be. I need to speed up. So the point of this is make sure you know your process. HR or people ops usually do sessions, send out emails. Make sure you understand the process. If you don't, ask your manager. Things to note. Good performance doesn't mean a promotion. And this catches so many people out. You may be doing a great job. You may be turning out your tickets. You may be fixing all the bugs. You may be writing all the code, and you may be wonderful. But you may not be actually demonstrating anything that you need to be doing at the senior level above. This is more important the higher up the chain you go. So if you are, for example, you could be writing all your code and stuff, but you're not actually taking any ownership of stuff. You're not coming up with solutions to problems. You're just doing exactly what your principal is telling you. And you're not actually doing any of that stuff, then that you're not a senior developer. I'm sorry, you're just not. You're not demonstrating anything to show that. And because what is kind of, in my opinion, why I think this is kind of come about is that there is expectation in the software engineering industry is that you have to be demonstrating that you're operating at that level before you do it, because the consequences of your actions are greater the higher up the ladder you go. And what I mean by that is if you're designing a greenfield project and you haven't done it before and you're not really ready for it and you haven't got the experience and you design it really badly, teams and business will be paying the cost of that for years to come, because you'll have designed an unscalable, unmaintainable system. And then also remember that your managers are only human, that they're trying their best. You don't know what's going on in their lives as well. And even if you have a really good manager, they can still have off days and forget to do stuff. So that's why the more you can control, the better. So how to make all of this work for you? So we start off with the goal setting. So this is right at the start of the year. Now, I like to have these conversations with people, and it's very good to have an off the record, verbal kind of conversations first. And that's where you go, I want to be earning £40,000 in a year. I want to be promoted next year. I want to be X, Y, and Z. I want to be leading that new project this time next year. I want to be doing these things. So then that drives the next conversation where you're actually writing down the specific goals that you need to be doing and hitting and demonstrating, so that if you achieve all of those goals, you will get your verbal goals, which is your salary increase of what you want, the promotion that you want, the flexibility or whatever other benefits of what it is that you're after. And that's makes it a lot easier. And Phil touched on this as well in his talk earlier. Make sure your goals are aligning with the team and the companies. Like if you're on a team and you want to do all security stuff and your team does nothing to do with security, then it doesn't matter how well you do, you're always going to be fighting against your team because it doesn't align with their goals. So it's definitely worth doing that. A tip for goal setting is a lot of places are using SMART now, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. I'm not going to go too much into goal setting, but that is a good way to kind of go about it. And the also thing to remember is it can take time for your manager to set up the opportunities in order for you to meet your goals. So if you're wanting to demonstrate that you can design a software or design a new feature or something from scratch, it can take a while to kind of orchestrate that opportunity in your project and to ring fence it to make sure you get it rather than the person who always does it. And those things can just take time throughout the year. So this is just a list of resources for goal setting. The ones at the top are kind of very much more business oriented. And then these two at the bottom, the head plan and the focus planner, they're kind of more like life kind of goals, but they're really good resources that kind of can help you kind of think about how you want to do it. And tie in then to like yearly goals, quarterly goals, and then business goals. So I will put these on Twitter as well after this, but if people want to take a picture, feel free. And right, so you've set all your goals. Then this is into the meat of the year now. So you're having your weekly one-to-ones with your manager, whether you set it up or they've set it up for you. Come prepared to that session. Like that is your time with your manager for you to drive and to get what you want out of that time. So many times I've done one-to-ones with people and they just chat about the weekend. And that's fine. You can do that for a couple of minutes and that's how you build up a relationship, but it shouldn't be a half an hour conversation. That should be you going, bit of chit chat at the start and then, right, I said I wanted to be promoted this year. Let's pull out my goals and what do I need to be doing? You ask the questions, get your feedback, know what you're not doing that you need to be doing. Feedback is a gift. Do with it what you want, but it is so valuable. You keep your notes and then also make sure your manager knows what you're doing elsewhere on other teams to help. And then also, it's also a good place to have conversations about, oh, I saw such and such a company are doing a 4-day week. Is there any chance we could do that there? Or I really like the sound of that other project that another team is doing. What's the chances we could get onto that and have those kind of conversations? And the next bit then is really important. You need to evidence collect throughout the year because it makes it so much easier for your year-end process. And Julia Evans here, she does this thing called a brag doc. It's a very American term, but it's worth its weight in gold. Because these are the differentiators between people who tend to be more successful and get promoted, where they've documented throughout the year what they've done. And where this tends to be most successful for folks is they just set a weekly calendar slot on a Friday. They do almost like a personal retro. They reflect on what they've done this week, what they've learned. They've documented out and they've done that. I've seen people keep a Google Doc. They've emailed their manager every Friday. They've kept an open email just as a draft and they've added to it throughout the year. Figure out what works for you, that you can stick to it, and it's a maintainable habit that you will build upon throughout the year. Because I can barely remember what I had for breakfast this morning, never mind what anyone on my team did back in February. So that's when that document then is well worth its weight in gold. And the really important bits to record are the value and the impact of what it is that you've done. If you just give me a list of JIRA tickets, well, that's great. But if I tell you Thor did JIRA ticket 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what does that mean to you? Nothing. If it's actually, he delivered a piece of work that reduced the call center wait time by 30% or increased the performance of the system by 10%, then that means so much more. Record as much detail as possible so then you can pull it out. Complexities, difficulties, mistakes you've made, what you've learned from them, feedback that you've got and how you've addressed it. It's really nice to be able to kind of have a nice progressive story throughout the year. And if you've been mentoring and progressing other people on your team, and if you've assisted and helped other people on other teams. Non-promotional work. This has got a lot of media attention off the back of this book, The No Club. And a lot of people are saying that you shouldn't do any, but I don't necessarily agree. I think you should do some of it because it can be the differentiator between you and another person. So while it's defined as jobs that are important to your organization but will not advance your career, yes, if you do that and nothing else, your career will not advance. I can guarantee that. But if we go back to our Avengers example again, and you've got a really high performing team, if you think in one of the films, spoiler alert, Captain America had a support group for the people who lost their family during the blip or whatever. So that is a non-promotional task, but it pipped him ahead of maybe Thor, who did nothing and sat and drank during that time period. So, it's those wee things that whenever you're level pegging with someone, those little things can make a difference. And you can use them really strategically as well to build up evidence for maybe stuff that you're not able to do in your project, like owning something, delivering, planning, taking ownership, mentoring, progressing. And the key thing is that you document what it is that you do and you strategically choose it. If you do that and your project work suffers, then you have a problem. There's been so many times where I've had to stop stuff because the project got too busy and I just had to deliver your project. Your project should always come first no matter what. If you have to hit a deadline, you hit that deadline. So for year end then, when you've gone through all of that stuff, you'll come around to your year end process. This is when your brag doc or whatever you want to call it is its weight in gold, because there's always you have to fill out a form, you have to do a 1-page, or you have to do some sort of self-assessment. And that's where you have that nice diary or journal of evidence where you can go, oh, I performed well, and that's that example. This is where I went above and beyond. This is where I solved a hard problem. This is where I've operated at the next level. And you can pull out specific examples from February, March, April, whatever time of the year, and a nice progressive storyline throughout the year. And it just makes it easier. So whenever your manager takes this doc and then goes to the panel or to the other people, you've got a body of evidence that you can rave about how great the person is because you can detail all of these other examples that may have impacted people on that panel, and then they can relate to it a lot more. And it just makes it so much easier rather than just going, Thor was great, he killed a load of people. It's just like, you have to have like those specific evidences of where they made a difference. Like Captain Marvel took out the big spaceship in the end battle scene, which had a massive impact on the battle. It's things like that that makes it more interesting. So the slide then that everybody wants, the pay slide. So whenever your year-end, whether it's a year-end process or you go to your manager and you want more money, it's still the same kind of very similar kind of process. The manager doesn't have a little pot of money they can just decide to give you $5,000 because you asked for it. They still have to go, like I would have to go to my boss and kind of go, such and such wants this, and then it has to go to HR, it has to go to finance, it still has to be approved, make sure that it's fair, it still has to be make sure that you're not just giving it to all the white males in the company. You still have to go through all of those bits. And you have to justify it. You have to justify why should this person get an extra 5K? And if all you have to say is, well, they just asked for it, it makes it a lot harder. Whereas if you go to them and go, well, such and such is asking for more money. This is all the value and the impact that they've delivered throughout this year. This is the offers that they're getting from other places, or they've looked at other jobs and they're considering these things. But this is why we should invest our money in this person, because we want to keep them and we don't want to lose them. Which is a much nicer story than they're complaining that X is getting more amount of money and I don't. Those statements just they don't sound as good because you're comparing yourself against other people and you don't know what that other person has done to warrant what it is that they have. And you also don't know what's going on. You don't know if that person's on a performance PIP. You don't know if they've been hired at the wrong level. You don't know. People never tell you in the pub, oh, I get overpaid for what I do. No one ever says that. Like, no one ever will tell you, that I'm unfairly paid or I got a good deal or anything like that there. They'll just tell you what they earn. And then you kind of think, oh, well, I should be getting that because we're at the same level. But you maybe aren't seeing a lot of stuff that maybe they're doing, not on the project, that's maybe delivering value elsewhere. So there's a lot of stuff you just have to take it with a pinch of salt. Not to say don't have those conversations, but it's just take everything with a pinch of salt, which is fine. But if you're wanting to increase your chances of success, evidence why you are adding the value and the impact. Yeah, timing is important as well. And because if you're asking for, going and asking for money very close to the year-end process, they will typically, it's very hard to kind of get, they'll go, well, can I not wait a couple of months? We're about to go through the whole process anyway. If it's right after the process as well, it's a little bit harder as well. Not impossible, but it's just harder. And also be aware of how well your company is doing. If your company is not making money and is all over budget and is struggling, then they are not going to give you more money. They're not. So be mindful of how well your company is also doing. And this is also where kind of your one-to-one kind of conversations, if like it's okay to ask for more money, that's fair enough. If you're better to go and have a conversation with your manager and go, look, I really feel like I should be at this salary. This is why I believe it. You have your evidence, you have your stuff, you have maybe your couple of job offers from other people. Give your manager a chance to fix the situation. If they come back and go, no, but then it's fair enough then to look for other opportunities, I think. But be mindful of if you go out there and you go and you interview for other places and you get a couple of counter offers and you come back and your company goes, sorry, we just can't match that. You need to think about what you're going to do in that scenario. Whether that's you're going to go, fair enough, I'm going to go take that job that I didn't really want because they pay me more. Or are you going to, accept it and stay where you are? So you need to be comfortable with that yourself because it's not always guaranteed that they will be able to match whatever offer is out there. And sometimes it can be also, you need to think about what it is that you want as well, because sometimes the more money doesn't always mean it's what you want either. But give your manager a chance, talk to them, make sure you get those opportunities. It could be moving different teams, it could be other things. And then obviously, if you do have all your evidence and you're adding value and stuff anyway, then a pay increase shouldn't be a problem. So these is some more just resources that I kind of talked about during the talk. And then I've also included 2 books at the end there on Atomic Habits by James Clear and also Eat That Frog. So they're kind of books that kind of help with productivity and also kind of bake into that habit of reflection and documenting your brag doc and that sort of stuff. And I think we're at time. So thank you folks for coming and listening. I hope that was useful and you just weren't bored. I don't want to ask this, but is there any questions? No? I'm looking at, oh, there is. Okay. Shout. We'll go with this one first.
Just wondering about in one-to-one, sometimes I find a manager can be doing a lot of talking, and sometimes it's beneficial, maybe there's something you were having trouble with, and they're teaching you or showing you good resources there and more. Should you be trying to rein it back and driving the one-to-one yourself?
Yes. Now, what can happen is usually your manager will have a list of things that they kind of want to talk to you about. They shouldn't be asking you for project updates or anything in that time. That's your time to talk about problems and issues that you have and to raise concerns. It's best to get in at the start. So go in there with a list of agenda of what you want to talk. So usually anytime I do one-to-ones, we'll have the chit chat about, any crack, how are you feeling, how are you getting on, are you okay, is everything all right? And then it's like, is there anything you want to talk about today? And then that's when you go, boom, I want to talk about X, 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 and X. And then usually then by the time of that, then I would talk about anything I want to specifically talk about with the person. And if they don't have anything to talk about, then I'll just launch in. And as these guys can attest to, I have done and I will take up a full 30 minutes talking to people about what they should and shouldn't be doing on a project or how they can get better. Or if people don't know what they want to do, I've had that before where they really just like, I don't know what I want to do anymore. I've kind of hit this plateau and I don't know if I love programming or if I want to do this. And like you can have more exploratory kind of conversations. But if you go in there at the start and go, and if they do go off on tangents, because I do that all the time, you go, I'm sorry, we only have 30 minutes here and I know this is really good and really important, but I really wanted to talk to you about these things. And that's okay. They should go, oh, fair enough, sorry, that was my bad. So that's fair enough to do. But yeah, if you go prepared and ready, then just get in first. Is the easiest thing. There was another question. Sorry, I didn't repeat the question, but I hope everybody heard it.
I'm Joan, work in recruitment. The topic of counter offers. That's a manager.
I'm joking.
The relationship with your employee in terms of the loyalty and I'm not a believer in it.
So the question was from a recruiter. I'm joking. No, they're asking about if you come with counter offers, does that damage the relationship? If your manager's any good, they shouldn't. Like, you're not naive enough to think that you're going to stay loyal. Like, who here has worked in a company there and only one job, apart from the graduates who haven't worked anywhere else? But like, I don't know anyone, maybe bar one or two, who have stayed in one company their entire career. Like, they're very rare people. And there's nothing, I'm not going to stand in the way of someone if there's a really good opportunity for them. Like, I'm not going to do that. If it's a better job and a better fit for them, because there's just some companies that are a better fit for people and their skill sets and what they want to do, I'm not going to stand in the way of that. I'll go fair play to you. So, all the best. It kind of depends on, are they doing it, how you do it. If you're going in there all aggressive and puffed up and going, you're ready for a fight, then that's a bit more awkward. But if you're dead on, you go, look, I've got this offer, I'm kind of thinking about it, can you match it? Here's why I believe I can add value and I can bring value to this place and why I want to stay. But this is a really good opportunity and I don't want to turn it down if you can't match it. That's a fair conversation. Like, I wouldn't begrudge that with anybody. If your manager does maybe get upset about it, then maybe you should take your counter offer. But like, if you built up that good relationship with your manager, they shouldn't stand in the way of a good opportunity, or they'll fight tooth and nail to keep you. It'll be one or the other. Is there any other questions? All right, folks, if you do think of anything or you want to reach out, give me a shout on Twitter, LinkedIn. I could talk about this stuff all day. I'm not going to the after party tonight, but do give me a shout. And like, I'm in Belfast most weeks as well, so if you ever want to meet for coffee or anything out there, do give us a shout. And thanks again for coming on this.